Today, we're going to talk about accessory drive belts, the two types there are, the different sizes and styles between the two, and how to measure for them. So stick around and we'll get to it. So in the beginning, the only thing you really had were generators and water pumps. So two things, they can both be driven by one belt. So you've got crankshaft here, water pump here, generally above the crankshaft somewhere, not always, and then a generator or an alternator. You can run that with one belt, and it's a V belt. There's different lengths of these, there's different widths of these, and there's different depths of these. But it's a V belt because the cross section of it is shaped like a V. Here's a V belt pulley. As you can see, you have a V notch right there. This would actually be for two different belts. So that's great. You're cooling your car, you're keeping it charged, but then came power steering. Now let's see what happens. We've now got our power steering right here, but how are we gonna drive it? This belt's not gonna reach, and you can't run this one all the way around, you can skip the water pump. So what do? You have to add a belt. So great. One belt, easy. Water pump, two pulleys, two grooves on the pulley here, one groove, and two here, and you're still driving everything. Well, then came air conditioning. What does that do? That adds a belt. Now we have air conditioning. Now we have three belts. This starts to create a problem when you do anything else, like maybe add an air pump here and a fourth belt. You're getting a lot of side load on your crank pulley and your crankshaft. You're gonna get a lot of side load on your power steering or your water pump. It's too many belts, it's too complicated. You have 1, 2, 3, and then possibly 4 things to tighten. They could slip. So if something's making a noise, which belt is it? Which one do you have to change? If you need to change the alternator belt, you have to take everything off just to change one belt. So what was the solution? The solution that manufacturers came up with is a serpentine belt. It's a flat belt, very thin, and essentially it is still a V belt. It has 6 grooves, sometimes less, down to maybe 3 or 4, sometimes more, up to 7 or 8, maybe 10. And what this will allow you to do is run everything off of one belt. Let's see how that works. We've got our serpentine belt on. We're running everything off of one belt: power steering, crankshaft, water pump, air conditioning, and alternator. Then what we had to do is add an idler pulley here so that these two can run in the same direction, and a tensioner. This will be spring loaded, and this will actually keep tension on this belt so as it stretches over time, it doesn't slip. It's a simple system. This is what most cars use today. It's one belt, it's a little longer. The only complicated thing is if you're building an engine yourself and you want to use a serpentine belt, all these pulleys have to be in a line. If you use individual V belts, things can be offset. You can have an alternator here and the pulley for the power steering might be here. And you can do that with V belts because you could find pulleys and spacers to make that work. Serpentine belt, everything's got to line up. However, it's only one belt to replace. It self-tensions. Most V belt systems do not self-tension. V belt system, you're going to have an adjustment here when this belt slips. You'll have an adjustment here when this one slips, and here. So much better system. This is what most modern cars have. Older cars, V belts, but if you're building it yourself, you've got the choice of which one to do. Now let's talk about the numbers on the belts. First up is V belts. V belts have usually 5 digits, or maybe they have digits followed by a letter and then 4 digits. It's 2 different systems. One is an early system. This is the older system. This is a newer system. I'll explain both. This first 2 numbers, 15. 15 describes the cross-sectional width of this belt, and it is in inches. So this is 15 32nds of an inch. So 7/16-ish, 7.5 16ths. It's 15 32nds of an inch. That's what the 15 is. 400, realistically, should be 40.0 because this number describes the length of the belt on its mating surface, not the outside circumference. Outside circumference will get you in trouble. You'll get too big of a belt. Mating surface, so that inner circumference is 40.0 inches. Newer system down here, 10A. A on this is describing the cross-sectional width, sort of like this. A being narrow, B would be wider. On the old style, you have a 13 would be a narrower belt. A 17 would be a wider belt. Those are the most common, 15s and 17s. 13s you'll see on small cars. Usually when you need less surface area, less friction, so you can use a narrower belt. This 1015, that is still circumference, but that is now in millimeters. So easy to decode. This is width, this is length, this is width, this is length. It's a similar setup for serpentine belts. This one has two number systems as well. 465, again, should have a decimal point. 46.5 inches, again, inner circumference on the mating surfaces. K, that right there, means it's automotive. There would be a different designation for a boat or industrial, possibly agricultural. 6 means, how many ribs does this belt have? This is a 6-rib serpentine belt. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You may see K4, you may see all the way up to maybe K10, but K4 through probably 8 is pretty common. Down here is the newer version of the same thing. This is a 6-rib belt. P means it is metric. K still means auto. This again is length in millimeters. So really you just went from inches to millimeters, and they decided to swap some other letters around just to make it different. It's a pretty simple system. That's pretty much all you need to know about belts and how to measure for your own. If you were building your own engine and you wanted to measure for your own belt, you could use string, you could use wire, but those are too narrow and you're probably gonna get too short of a belt. If you could find a thicker rope, maybe 3/8 or better, if you have it, something a little bit thicker, and run that all the way around here, mark where the two ends meet, measure that out, and then what I would suggest is get whatever number you come up with. Say you come up with 50 inches, go to the parts store, get a 50, get a 51 inch, and get a 49 inch. That way you don't have to make multiple trips to the store if your measurement was off with your rope. Pretty easy. Other than that, belts are pretty simple, except for taking on and off. They can be kind of a pain in the butt. But serpentine belt, you've only got one pain in the butt. V-belt system, multiple pains in the butt, which is why they went to this. So that's all I had to say about belts. If you're building an engine, you've got your choice of V-belt or serpentine belt. If you've got a car nowadays, you've probably got a serpentine belt, unless it's from 1990 or older. 1990 or older, you've probably got V-belts. Now you know how to measure them. Now you know what the sizes mean if you want to change them. So that's all I've got this time. If your belt's making noise, go out there and fix it. See you next time.